Welcome to the Pet Loss Companion. I'm Ken Dolan-Del Vecchio. I'm here with my friend and co-author, Nancy Saxton-Lopez, and a very special guest who we'll be introducing in just a couple minutes. This is a program that is an outgrowth of the book that we wrote some years ago called The Pet Loss Companion, Healing Advice from Family Therapists Who Lead Pet Loss Groups. The podcast, the video cast, allows us to engage with you much more directly, and a lot of what we do is we read stories from people who write to us and tell us about what their life has been like through the loss of their pet, through the beginning of their journey of healing, or maybe sometimes the anniversary of their loss and how they're doing. And so if you'd like to write to us, we're happy to receive your correspondence. And you can reach me at kenddv@gmail.com. You can reach Nancy at nsaxtonlopez at csmpc.com. That's nsaxtonlopez at csmpc.com. All of what I'm sharing right here in the beginning is in the description that accompanies the live broadcast or wherever you may be seeing or listening to a replay. We also would like you to know that you can support our work in a number of ways. Of course, you don't have to do that. We do this more as a labor of love, but you can support our work by becoming a Substack subscriber. And there's a link to the Substack where we post the email correspondence and beautiful pictures that people send us. You can send a gift through Venmo or PayPal. You can join as a monthly subscriber. The program is a friend of Dakin Humane Society in Springfield, Massachusetts. Dakin is a multi-service adoption shelter center for animals of all sorts. And Dakin also sponsors a number of different programs that help people and their relationships with animals. And one of them is a monthly pet loss support group on Zoom that I facilitate. It takes place on the second Tuesday of the month from 6 to 7:30 p.m. It's cost-free to participants, and there's a link to RSVP. And if this will be helpful for you, please consider joining. And if you think it may be, please join soon, because the meeting tends to fill up really quickly. And it's really interesting for many different reasons, but one of which is that people join from all over the country and all over the world. So there's a lot of different perspectives that are brought together in that meeting. And if you join and perchance you decide that if you RSVP and then you decide that you actually can't join us, it would be great if you could let me know that. Just send me a note and we'll open the registration again. And we also would like to ask you to please consider subscribing on YouTube, because it enhances the visibility and accessibility of the program. We finally would like you to know that we have an affiliate relationship with a company called Bereave. Bereave makes these really finely crafted memorial plaques with an image of your beloved animal companion and then whatever language you would like to include. And it's the kind of thing that you can put outside in a memorial garden or gravesite, or maybe inside where you keep mementos of your beloved animal friend. And if you purchase a plaque from Bereave, you will be giving us a little bit of a kickback of support as well. And Nancy's going to show you that.
There's Bailey.
This is we always we asked for a sample to make sure that it was in fact something that was substantial, and it really is. So we have a wonderful gentleman with us today. His name is Joe Licata, and I'll tell you just a little bit about him, and then Nancy's going to start our discussion with him. Joe Licata was blessed to have Harvey, a beautiful Border Terrier-Dachshund-Pug mix, by his side 24/7 for over 14 years. And he's going to share how wonderful Harvey was to all who knew him, and how Joe's love for him has made grieving his passing these past 2.5 months very, very hard. His grief is especially compounded by substantial guilt and anxiety from euthanizing Harvey because of the quality of life, the extinguishing quality of life that Harvey was experiencing. And he's going to talk some about that. He's going to share some on how he and his family are doing, and how he worried that Harvey had more life to live. But you'll also hear that Harvey was extraordinarily encumbered by his increasing health concerns. And as always, Joe made the right, I'm going to tell you, Joe made the right decision, and it was the right thing for Harvey, but we're going to hear the details. Nancy, want to get us started?
Yes. So, Joe, thank you. Joe and I actually, we work together, right? We've been working together since Harvey died in May. And I got a call from Dr. Sheila McCaffrey, who's been on the podcast. And she is a acupuncture, hospice, euthanasia vet. And Joe was working with her around Harvey's needs. And so we did start to work together. And I appreciate, Joe, you coming, because it is we're working together. So that's something different that we haven't had on the podcast. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
And so I want you to talk to us a little bit about Harvey, a brief history, and then really started with his issues. I think he had, of course, some issues with his back legs. Then it started to be dementia. So it would be really helpful, I think, for you to kind of give us a synopsis of your beloved Harvey and what living with him was like, and then what started to happen towards the end of his life in the beginning of this year.
Sure. Well, Harvey was actually our neighbor's dog. Her daughter was going to Clemson University, and her and her sorority sisters went to a shelter and rescued him at about 5 months old. And they were actually a sorority house where they brought him to. So he lived in a sorority house at Clemson for a month.
Pretty nice.
Yeah, I tried to get him to tell me the secrets that were going on there, but he was what stays in Clemson, what happens stays in Clemson. But we used to see him walking with the owners, and we're just happened to be by the bedroom window. Saw him walking and said, "What a beautiful, unique dog." He had these tiger stripes. He had a little alfalfa sprout coming off the top of his head. And I really honestly never saw a dog that looked like that. And so my wife and I were saying, what a neat dog. Fast forward, the owners were working all day and left the dog in first a bathroom, then a gated kitchen, and asked my wife if she would stop in with my daughter, who was 5 years old, and walk him, take him out. And they did. Then the next thing that happened was they were going to take him to a shelter because they just couldn't manage it anymore. And we said, no, you're not going to take him to a shelter. He's going to move 2 houses down. And we had him since 6 months old. He really never left my side. I took him to the park really for the first time, and I just felt that it was comfortable to let him off the leash, not even having 24 hours with him. He wouldn't leave my side. We walked around the track together as if he was trained off leash for 5 years. Wow. And then he became very protective of me. So he was a clearinghouse for any other dog to come up to me at the park, and for me to, God forbid, I pet the other dog. He was very jealous. But he was a beautiful, beautiful dog. And the word that was used often was handsome. He's such a handsome dog. And, our dog sitter called him Sean Connery. That was the name. Since the Border Terrier has a Scottish mix to it. And he had the gruffy beard. And so he was Sean Connery. And then the other dogs, if they wanted to even play fight, he wouldn't let them. He had there he is in all his majesty, right?
Oh, so cute.
And you can see the one on the bottom left corner. We actually fell asleep in the sun together for 2.5 hours.
Oh, what a baby.
I burnt, he didn't. So
he was insanely cute.
Yes, really cute.
So unique.
So cute.
So
unique. And you can't forget the tail, right? The pug tail.
And like I was telling Ken before we started, I didn't know about the pug mix until I did research when he was sick, because, and we'll get into that, the gene for those illnesses don't live in a Border Terrier or a Dachshund, but they do live in a pug. So found out kind of the hard way, but he had the curly tail. And he used to always break up any type of interaction between dogs at the park. Like, I don't know why they wanted me to come back with them, because they wouldn't let their dogs play together, because he thought they were fighting, and he would go into bark at one dog, separate them, go bark at the other dog. And I said, I think he was a boxing referee in a previous life. You know, he just was constantly
He was an
separating.
arbitrator like you, Joe.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. He
Yeah.
was an arbitrator.
Yeah, and then I noticed he had a herding instinct. So when he would go run in the field with another dog, he would circle around them and want to bring them back to their owner, like thinking that dog was lost. So he was so unique and, you know, had some crazy quirks, and everybody loved them. After a while, they start
Mr.
calling
Mayor,
him, yes, they
right?
start
Mr.
calling him the
Mayor.
mayor. Yes, that was his nickname. And we worked together 24. We were together 24/7. I worked from home. I had his bed on my desk, and he was my emotional support dog for 14 and a half years. He was always here. Very lonely being a solo practice, and not really having a lot of interaction with other people. So he was my life and blood and soul for so many years that, of course, when he passed, the grieving was just dreadful for me. It's been dreadful.
Mhm.
So to fast forward to that part of it, you know, I thought he had a tumor on his backside. It was about a year and a half ago because he was limping, and I noticed sort of a ball of something by his hip. I took him to the doctor, and she said, you know, I wish it was just something I could take off, but it's a degenerative spine disease that he has, and I never heard of this. And I didn't ask more than that about like how it would progress or anything, because I really didn't know. So it went from sort of limping on his one leg to that back paw being paralyzed. So you could take that paw, bend it over, and he would just stand on his knuckles, and he would not know that that paw was turned
Yeah.
upside down. Then the other one went like that. And then eventually he couldn't go up the stairs. He couldn't, after a while, go down the stairs, and I was carrying him around a lot. Um, but my limitations were physically. I was born with spinal stenosis. I had back surgery in 2015, so I had a very limited amount of threshold before I was injured to carry a dog around all the time. But I did
Mhm.
it, and I had an ice pack and a belt over me for a long time, so I could continue to help
Mhm.
him up and down stairs, into cars, out of cars. And then later on with medications, he had to drink a lot of water and had to go to the bathroom sometimes around the clock. So I was literally physically at a really bad point. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden the other two hit. And for a couple of weeks, he had been crying a lot at night, like around dinner time. And I thought he was just hungry, but he really never had a huge appetite, but I would feed him. We uh, we cooked him. We boiled chicken every day for him. He ate chicken tenderloins every day for lunch, and then had very expensive dog food for dinner. So it was about $150 to feed him a week, right? So I thought
Well,
he was just hungry, and I'm saying, how can you be hungry? Look at all this good food we're giving him. He needed to be soothed and pacified, and that was because of the dementia. But I didn't know at the time. So I'm feeding him, and I was saying to my wife, "I can't believe how hungry he is." I thought he was crying because he wanted more food, or we'd give him a treat or a milk bone, and and then eventually I just realized it's not, it's something else.
Yeah.
And then I went to the doctors and I got medication for him. They would give him like gabapentin and trazodone, um, and then the night sundowning became so bad that it couldn't get him calm unless I was literally over medicating him. And so if I wasn't overfeeding him, I was over medicating him. His stomach was swollen. He went up to 40 pounds. His breathing was really labored because of his weight. You could see it when he was breathing. And then with the over medication, the next morning he literally looked like a zombie and wasn't waking up until 9:30. Um, Now the problem for me was like physically I was almost done myself, and then emotionally when the other shoe dropped, I just really started to fall apart emotionally with it. And I know he probably wasn't suffering because of the two types of illnesses he had, but it was very hard for me to see him
Mhm.
with both. He used to have to drag his legs for about 3 or 4 feet before he could stand up on them, and then he limped and he would fall down and couldn't get back up. If he went onto part of a hardwood floor, his legs would start to spread out and he was going to split. We'd have to run over and grab him.
Mhm.
So I did as best I could physically. I realized I didn't have much left because my back was so bad that I was having nerve pains shooting out the bottom of my feet from
Mm.
the lower lumbar disc being compressed again. So I was on ice packs, taking 8 to 10 Advil a day. And I did this for about 2 months. The end of the day, 7 o'clock, was when from my entire day I was exhausted and then just really needed to lay down and chill out. And then I was involved with the dementia then and the
Yeah.
sundowning.
Right.
And so I really wore myself out pretty ragged. And at the time I had Sheila come in. I was mentally detached. I literally felt like a body experience when I was uh, went over the euthanization in the house and went through the process. I had canceled it once before the preceding week, and I wanted to try more, and it didn't help. And then I was at a point where I couldn't take care of him anymore,
Mm.
physically, mentally, emotionally. I saw him hyperventilating, having seizures, and it was breaking my heart.
Yeah, of
Just
course.
broke my heart. And he was so tough and so strong that I know he could have kept going on if I could have kept up with him for X amount of months. But I that's where the guilt comes in because I feel like I failed him because I couldn't keep up with it anymore. It would have
Yeah.
been a lot easier for me if he had some type of major seizure. I took him to the vet. The vet said, no, he's got to be put down. And in that moment, I would have been at peace. It's quality of life considerations, and it affected my family because
Yeah. Right.
we couldn't. Here's what we couldn't do: we couldn't have our TV night together because of the sundowning and having to deal
Mhm.
with that. We couldn't leave him alone because he would hyperventilate, and who knows if he had a seizure or not. He could not be left alone anymore. My daughter, who was spending whatever little time she spent with her parents instead of with her friends, was upset about the dog being, so sick and so loud and vocal that it made her crazy. So the family life was going down pretty fast too.
Yeah.
You know,
Joe, could you describe what sundowning is? Because many people may not be familiar with that.
Yeah, so, it starts with the fact that the dog is, and this might be just from any older dog, but he's just sleeping so much during the daytime, and then, you're ready to all get comfortable at night, and now the dog is kinda wide
Right.
awake, and he starts to walk around, and next thing you know, he turns around and he's, like, hyperventilating. It's really just heavy panting, but there's no reason for him to be panting except for the fact he's sick. He's got all that anxiety in him, not really knowing where he is. Then he would walk into the kitchen and he would just start staring for like 10 or 15 minutes into space. At times, I would take him out and he would just be barking at nothing for like 10 minutes. But the
Mhm.
biggest trait was the vocalization, just crying and crying and crying, and you can't soothe them unless, like I said, I was doing one or two things, overfeeding him to calm
Right.
him down or over medicating him to make him into a zombie. And, you know, in the daytime, when he was up in my office and just laying in his bed, what he always did, he was sleeping, and that's what he always did. So to me, I still had that normalcy with him,
Mhm.
um, except for the fact physically I was going down, but emotionally, the daytime was fine. And when I wanted to get comfortable at night with my family, that's when the other shoe dropped with the dementia. And, at that point, I talked to Sheila, she came in. I still made a last pitch to not put him down, and because she said, "Look, here's my crystal ball. His legs from the myelopathy are gonna be shot completely in, like, 3 months. And now what you have to do is how are you gonna bridge the gap between now and 3 months with the dementia? Because you're not dealing with just one
Right.
thing." And, I tried to give her an answer. I said, "Well, I'll try better to get ahead of it with the medication. I'll try to get ahead of the sundowning with the medication." And she just looked at me and she said, "The medications aren't gonna work after a while." And so she goes, "So how else are you gonna bridge the gap?" And I said, I don't have an answer. I
Yeah.
don't." And at that point, I just and I was exhausted at that point, and I felt inside me that she was giving me sort of this out from all of this. She was giving me this out that I took, and that's my perception, and that's where the guilt comes from.
Yeah.
So Sheila is your veterinarian?
She was just the mobile euthanasia hospice
Okay.
vet.
All right.
Yeah.
And it sounds like she was giving you her clinical perspective on how this was going to progress, and it wasn't going to be good for anybody, it sounds like.
That's right. And she said it's
Right.
just she said both illnesses are just gonna keep getting worse. They
Right.
don't get better, they're gonna keep getting worse. And then she said, "And what about the quality of your life?" And she saw the condition I was in. I was wrapped in an ice pack when I was talking to her. "And what about the quality of your family life? And don't you want the dog to go out with dignity?" She said, "Look at him, he's a proud dog." And, so all of that considered, um, quality of the dog's life, quality of my life, quality of my family's life, he was put down. And let me just stop to say she did a job that was peaceful, a peaceful transition. He went out, eating some treats while she distracted him to just give him a sedative. He was happy as heck in that moment. And I said to him, since he was in a sorority house, I said, she's very attractive, Sheila. I said, that's your last memories are going to be eating your favorite foods and hanging out with a beautiful woman. So that's one of the ways I make myself laugh. I said, I want to go out that way. So
Right.
So when I hear your story, Joe, I mean, I've never heard your story before. So when I hear it, all I can think of is how painful it would be for Harvey to be conscious every evening, but in extraordinary emotional distress. I mean, he's awake, but he's crying and he's frightened and he doesn't know where he is and he's wandering around and he's agitated.
yeah.
I don't think there's any good argument to have that continue indefinitely and get worse.
And I understand that, and I'll tell you that the thing about grief, it distorts reality,
Yeah.
because
Mhm. Yep.
I look back at it, and in my mind's eye, I'm putting to sleep this healthy dog, and I forget, because of the grief, I forget, no, I wasn't putting down a
Mm.
healthy dog. I was
Mm-mm.
putting
Yeah.
down a very sick dog.
Yeah.
And that guilt and the grieving part with the guilt is just, it doesn't subscribe to logic or
No.
reality.
Right.
It really has a mind of its own, and
Yep.
it has me putting to sleep a dog I loved for so much, for so
Yeah.
long. And then,
Right.
hey, look what you did. He had a lot more life left in him. And I know that's not the reality, but I
Yeah.
can't get that. I can't
I know.
process
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That's what we have been working on, right, Joe, for a while now, because Sheila said maybe 3 months, that got stuck in your head and you're like, oh, okay, then maybe I have more time, right?
Yes.
But I was so out of it at the moment, right? That with all of your physical maladies and your family issues and his the illnesses he was having, and it was, the emotional, mental, and physical, like you said, was overwhelming. And so you made the decision, right? And then
Yes.
afterwards, that's been our work, because
Yes.
you still feel so incredibly
Yeah.
guilty.
And I've said this to other people. I've written it to other people. You really have no right to feel guilty, but that's not going to change it. It
I
has
know.
its own. It has its own.
Yeah, guilt is
process.
the hardest emotion, I believe, in grieving.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
And I did put down 2 cats I had in the past. But they both there was no question. One had a leukemia and the other one had feline HIV, and they both stopped eating. Both were just shutting down with their organs. So, it sounds bizarre to say I wish Harvey went like that, but that's
Well, it would have been clearer for you after the
Yeah.
fact, right? Because you're feeling much better now physically, right? I mean, over the time you've
Yes.
gotten back to a place where you feel healthy again.
and
And now it's the emotional
Yes.
part, right?
That's even more that's even another twist, that you get further away from my physical and emotional state from back then.
Right.
And I said, I tricks me to say I could have still did it. Yeah, I could still do
Yeah.
it now. It took 4 weeks for my back to heal.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I could do it now, but I would be in the same position in a couple of weeks. So
And you've been, in your grief, I know it was hard, but you did go back to the dog park, right?
I had a
And you
memorial
saw
service.
all of, yes, and
Yeah.
you had a memorial service with all the
Yeah.
people that
Oh,
you
that's
hung
great.
out with,
Yeah.
right?
That's
And that
great.
walked dogs, had your dogs together,
It
right?
really helped, and they all, I mean, they could have stayed a half hour or 15 minutes. They stayed for 2 hours.
Mhm.
And they had the dogs that Harvey was friends with, and Harvey knew generations of dogs, that had passed before him, and then the new dogs. And so I had breakfast there, and coffee, and big picture of Harvey, and
Mhm.
even little wallet pictures of Harvey for them to take with them. And few of them still have it in their car or on the refrigerator. He was
Yeah.
loved. He was loved
Awesome.
by so many people, and so many other animals too.
Right.
What a great ritual. That's really
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's a great ritual.
Yeah. Yeah,
Maybe
I
some
used
other
to say, that if a wolf showed up with rabies, he would go up to Harvey and rub against him and kiss him and move on. Eh,
people.
every dog loved him. He had no, and the truth is, a fox once did that to him. Came right up to him with my wife and wouldn't do anything bad to him. He had a real
You had a gift.
he did. He was just such a spiritual
Special.
and special dog. He really was.
But also, Joe, you gave him the best life.
You did. You
You
gave him
really
a
gave
brilliant
him.
life.
Thank you.
He loved you and you loved him back.
More than anything.
Mhm.
I
I
mean,
know.
like I said to Ken, I don't think I've experienced this type of loss, because I feel like I lost a child.
Of course. That's what Ken and I have always said, right? Oh, look at that.
I really
So
like this sentiment. You are my favorite hello and my hardest goodbye. It's very,
Yeah,
very poignant.
very nice.
So you have a poem, right?
Yes, I'm going to read it. So as Joe and I were working together, he sent me this poem that he did for Harvey. I'm going to try to get through this. It's beautiful. The path we will walk again, and it's for Harvey. And you have, I think, Ken, the picture of the path. We walked that path 1,000 times, the lush green grass, the forest tapestry, and the bright blue sky. Although after 14 years, our walk has come to an end, I can tell you this, my best friend, we will walk it again. You see, the path we shared will never die. I feel your presence there every time I visit to sit, laugh, or cry. One day, when it is my calling, I will be there again, but this time you will run out of the woods and into my arms, and together that path we will walk without end.
Oh,
That's great.
Isn't that beautiful?
Thanks for
Joe, that's so beautiful.
thank you, Nancy, for
Really
reading
beautiful.
it. I
Really
can't read
beautiful.
my own work, and you did a beautiful job.
It's absolutely stunning. And we really, really thank you for sharing this with us and
It's
all
my
of our
pleasure.
audience,
Yeah.
because it's going to resonate with them.
I hope it helps even one other person.
Yeah,
So
it's going to help more than that.
It's going to help a lot of people, I'm sure. And
Mm.
I also just want to acknowledge that Nancy lost her beloved
Yeah,
Ellie just a couple days ago, right?
Yeah, Saturday.
Saturday.
And we'll do a podcast then.
We'll talk
my
about
Ellie.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not quite ready, but yes.
Yeah.
No, thank
So we
you.
want to thank you, Joe. And if you find this program useful, remember again, if you haven't already, to please subscribe on YouTube. It helps make it more visible. And Joe Licata, thanks so much for being with
Yeah,
us.
it's
We really
been wonderful.
thank you both. I really appreciate it. Thank you.